Welcome to the first BeeCraft podcast of 2026. If you'd like to subscribe to the international award-winning magazine, please go to www.bee-craft.com.
Hello, I'm Lucy Parkinson, the Deputy Editor of BeeCraft magazine, and we're kicking off the new year with a podcast. I'm here with Richard Ricketts. Say hello, please, Richard.
Hi, Lucy.
And Stephen Fleming.
Hello, Lucy.
Who are co-editors of the magazine. We'd like to talk more about the magazine and the January 2026 issue that's with you now. So, Stephen and Richard, you went to Scilly last summer, and we talk about that in this month's magazine. What are the highlights from that trip for the two of you?
Richard, we know what your highlight was. Go on, Richard.
Or your highlight.
I don't know why you gang up on me like this. The episode Stephen is referring to is not the fact that we spent a glorious few days of the Scilly Isles, the Isles of Scilly rather, visiting the various islands and the wonderful people and seeing the bees. It's the fact that he fell off a boat into the water, and not only that, we managed to capture it on film, and there's a picture of that in the current issue. But other than that, Stephen, what were your highlights of the trip?
My highlight was seeing your reaction to me falling into the water. I thought, what a supportive co-editor I have. There he is applauding, not moving the slightest to help me out of the water. But then that's what I've grown to expect editing this magazine.
Well, listen, one of the things about BeeCraft people often say is that we have wonderful photography, and it would be remiss of me to miss an opportunity to get an excellent photograph of you falling in the water. So obviously I need to make sure that we got some good images of that before before anything changed in the scene.
You were supposed to be behind the camera, not in front of it. I do notice that if readers look carefully, they'll see the shadow of Gilly Halliday, who's the fantastic guide around Scilly and who's the informal coordinator of Scilly beekeepers. She was there. She knew this was going to happen. If you look closely at the water, you'll see her shadow with her hands held above her head, holding her smartphone, ready to capture the incident.
I think she's had enough guests on the island, grockles or whatever they like to call them there, climbing in and out of boats onto the sandy shore to know that at some point it was going to happen.
Especially if it's windy. We've got to mention the wind. It wasn't...
Oh, yeah. It was blowing a hoolie, and the boat swung round and knocked me over, knocked my feet from under me, and I just about held on to the side of the boat and recovered myself gracefully.
Yeah, it's important actually to stress the danger we put ourselves into to get images and articles like this for the magazine. Because if you look at the pictures, it just looks like we're in the Caribbean having a wonderful time on yellow sandy beaches and blue skies. And
actually, it was very hard work.
It's hard work. It was tough, as they say, but somebody has to do it, and on this occasion it was us.
Yeah. Very admirable.
But the reason we were there, Stephen, this was your fifth visit.
Yeah.
And what interesting new things did you discover?
Well, we had an extra bit in the Game of Drones this time by putting skeps in corners of the islands where we hoped we might catch some swarms from other islands. And the beekeepers had very kindly marked their queens so that we could maybe spot to see if a swarm had crossed the water to another island to occupy a skep there. In fact, we just had one skep occupied, and typically, of course, it was with an unmarked queen. So we don't know where it came from, but we do suspect that was an inter-island one. The whole point of this being that these islands are very small, very few bees anyway. So if they don't cross the water, there's a serious risk of inbreeding. And we think that on one island, St. Agnes, there has been inbreeding in the past. That has been rectified, and we're just looking to see how to plan for the future, to see how we can stop inbreeding, because we do not want any imports into the islands. They are varroa free, they're free of lots of other diseases, so it's really important that we can keep those viruses and varroa out, but make sure there's good healthy bee population. Of course, at the end of the season we got this horrendous shock when the Asian hornet, the yellow-legged hornet, turned up. So it was quite capable of crossing the water, and we wait to see whether it had released any gynns, any virgin queens at the end of the season. We're hoping it didn't, but we'll know next spring with spring trapping. Speaking of which, that's the really big news this month, that the NBU will not be doing any spring trapping this year. They will be continuing, as far as we know, they'll be continuing to take down nests and to deactivate them. But spring trapping will now be down to beekeepers. And we have an article by Andrew Durham, which was written before that announcement, but showing the difficulties that we may face and showing what's been happening in France when there hasn't been a really good coordinated response to protecting against the yellow-legged hornet. That's a really good article in this issue, and we'll be getting more from Andrew as the season goes on. We've got a really good practical one from him coming up later in the year.
Brilliant, and sorely needed if beekeepers are having to step up, which it looks like they will early next year.
And the concern is that it's going to be seen as a beekeeper problem, when really it's everybody's problem. So I think we've got to be very careful on that front.
And learn from, like Andrew said, learn from France, learn from other countries who are years ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and who have made quite a few mistakes along the way, really. What was your favourite article this month, Lucy?
Well, I'm extremely biased, but it's probably my interview of Rachel Bower, who's an award-winning poet. I spoke to her a couple of months ago. I actually caught her. She was in the middle of writing her second novel. I don't know if readers might know her first novel. It's called It Comes from the River. But her second novel is, well, it seems to be just as good from what she was saying. She had a huge wall of sticky notes in her office with her plan, set in Manchester Airport, and talking about how it used to be a peat bog and the oral tradition of the area. Going back, she's been looking in libraries for old maps and doing lots of interesting moss and peat and lichen research for this novel. But yeah, so I caught her and we spoke about her poetry, and really generously she's offered 2 of her poems from her collection Bee, which was published in May this year, for the magazine. So they're featured alongside the interview, which just talks a bit more about who Rachel is and why bee poetry is something that poets have been writing for, well, decades, if not centuries. So yeah, that was really enjoyable. I'm looking forward to seeing her again at next year's National Honey Show, which will be her first time. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, for the Honey Show, we have the BeeCraft lectures on the Friday, and already we're getting some really good candidates for next year. So I think readers will look forward to that. Absolutely. Richard, what was your favourite?
Well, what was my favourite? Well, you probably know I'm very interested in beekeeping history, and there are a couple of items about that. One that you wrote, Stephen, about a product called Yadil, which you can tell us all about in a minute. There was one that I wrote in our Curio section. Each month we have a article called Curios, and it's some interesting aspect, not necessarily historical, but generally of some sort of quirky aspect of beekeeping history. And this month I wrote about the Peckforton elephant, which I've known about for years but never visited. But I was lucky enough to be invited up to speak to Cheshire beekeepers a few months ago, and on my way home I passed through Peckforton, which is a Cheshire village, where there is a 4-metre high red sandstone elephant, a sculpture of an elephant, and on its back is a castle. So it's an elephant and castle. And in all the literature and looking online, people will always tell you that this was probably a beehive. And I thought, how curious, I wonder if it was. So I went to visit, and I don't think it would have been a beehive. It just seems too unlikely. There are some little entrances on it which look a bit like beehive entrances, but they could be drainage holes, possibly for water. But I spent a bit of time doing some research, and I think I've worked out, well, my theory is that there was a structure, a castle, in which bees were kept, and it wasn't actually all that far away. So a Victorian gentleman built a bee house, something to put skeps in the shape of a castle. And I think at some point the two structures have got confused in people's minds, and the Peckforton elephant has been ascribed since then as possibly being a beehive. So that's something that I wrote. Something I didn't write but I did really enjoy this month was the return of David Robinson. David wrote, was it for 3 or 4 years for us, about his garden in Devon. David formerly owned Sutton's Seeds, the very large gardening company, but also National Bee Supplies. and he's got a garden down near Oakhampton that he's been developing over the last few years, an organic garden, putting in all sorts of bee-friendly aspects to it, including a lovely bee house, which is a summer house, but with walls built out of cob and lots of tubes for solitary bees. He's built a semi-sunken greenhouse. And anyway, he gave us a summary because he hasn't written for the last year, and so he wrote a summary of what's happened to his garden over the last year and the bees that have visited it and the improvements that he's made to it. So I enjoyed reading that.
Me too. I thought it gave me lots of inspiration for my own garden. And
So that comes Peter Smith. I never know what to believe in Peter's things or not, but he has just sent me an email saying that he's giving a talk at the West Sussex Beekeepers Convention. Now, as I say, I'm not actually sure this is true, but he's saying he's giving a talk on bees and honey, tradition, myth, symbol, and legend. The only bee talk with a parental advisory sticker, aka the talk the Women's Institute tried to ban. Well, that's Peter for you. I always enjoy reading Peter. He's really good. So maybe we should have him on a future podcast with us.
very good idea. Let's do it.
And
You should mention we've got some new contributors as well. Of course, the last 4 or 5 years, we've had our Ask the Mentors section, which is where readers send in their questions to be answered. And Claire Densley and Martin Han have done a very good job between them of answering questions in their own interesting style. But they've stepped back. They've recently had their book published, and I think they're going on a little bit of a tour to publicize that. So we have some new contributors for that section, and in fact we have a panel of 4 very experienced beekeepers now answering your questions. So that's Christine Colsting, Leslie Jacks, who last year was the author of our beginners articles, Jane Medwell, and Damson Trigaskis. So between them, they all have their own interests and specialities. So when your questions come in, we'll decide, or they will decide, in fact, who they think is best suited to answer the question. So if you have any questions, send them to us and we'll forward them to our new panel.
Yeah, and I thought the labeling article that you wrote, Richard, was very instructive. Another good practical article in the magazine showing us what we can and cannot do with labels and all the grey areas in between. Really tricky one for beekeepers. It's a shame. It really is quite a difficult subject, but I thought you made it very clear.
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's something that people do really worry about. If you buy labels from any of the suppliers, they will have sorted it out for you. So all of the information is there, it's at the right size and so on. But of course, increasingly people these days want to make their own labels. You can use software at home and buy them from suppliers. And it's quite important to make sure that you do get the details correct. There's all of the worries over whether or not you can use the term raw to describe your honey. So I've written about that. And just all the small details that you do need to get right, because trading standards do from time to time buy jars of honey and make sure that they are what they say they are. I've had my own honey looked at by local trading standards, so I know this is something that's quite important.
And of course, the big news this month is Lars Chitka getting his acting debut. I'm not too sure it's his debut, but he certainly won an award for his appearance in The Last Bee. And we should tell listeners that there is another podcast parallel to this, in which Richard and I have a chat with Lars to hear about his acting performance in that exciting Mexican-based film, and also just to hear what work he's up to. Some really good work, and we even have an invitation to visit his lab again to find out more about that. So really looking forward to that.
Stephen, I mentioned Yadil.
Oh yes, Yadil. Well, we should be very thankful to Yadil, because it probably was one of the first advertisers in BeeCraft. Certainly it had the first front page advert, because that's the way they used to do it in 1919 when BeeCraft started. The front page of all the newspapers and the like would have advertisements, and there was Yadil. And for years Richard and I have been looking at Yadil and wondering what on earth this product was. It was clearly a health thing for bees. It transpired that it's still being mentioned to this day. and it's being mentioned in very derogatory terms. It's even been mentioned in Hansard. It was a quack cure, if ever there was a quack cure. But fortunately, it was a quack cure that cured everything under the sun, from Spanish flu of its day through to the diseases that bees were suffering in just after the first, or during and after the First World War. And it's become a byword for really bad advertising. Anyway, we tell its story there in BeeCraft and in our Echo section. And that's a real goodie, because Richard and I even went to see the premises that they operated from in London, and they were extraordinary premises in what's it called, Sicilian Avenue, in London. Extraordinary premises, but they weren't just selling to beekeepers; they were selling to everybody, because Yarrow could cure anything. Wonderful stuff.
Well, I think we should mention that all of the advertisers in today's BeeCraft are highly scrupulous and trustworthy.
Well, I think that's about all for this month. And we'll look forward to coming back next month, telling you a bit more about the magazine then, and maybe have a guest in tow. So thank you very much for listening, and a very happy 2026, and have a really good bee season. Bye then.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you're already a BeeCraft subscriber, thank you. And if you're not, you can easily do so by visiting the website www.bee-craft.com. It's very simple to subscribe. Annual subscriptions for 12 printed copies start at just £46, or only £28 for digital copies. For that, you'll receive 48 full-colour pages every month that many readers tell us they read cover to cover. Now about to celebrate its 108th anniversary, BeeCraft has throughout this century won awards for the best popular beekeeping magazine at Apimondia, the World Congress of Beekeeping. Please join us.